This is a Fox News alert, a dramatic development in the tense standoff at the University of Missouri campus. University President Tim Wolf under fire for weeks over how he's handled some racially tinged incidents on campus, stepping down in the past hour.
I'm resigning as president of the University of Missouri system. My motivation in making this decision comes from love. I love MU, Columbia, where I grew up, in the state of Missouri. I have thought and prayed about this decision. It's the right thing to do.
And tempers flared over the weekend when more than 30 Missouri football players, supported by their coach, in this tweet joined student protesters, saying that they would not play until Wolf was gone. Student activists who camped out overnight demanding racial justice.
I can't say for a moment that I feel safe on this campus. I don't feel safe walking through Greektown. I don't feel safe walking alone during the daylight, honestly.
This is something that is not unique to Missouri, and that's what people need to understand. It's an issue that is around the nation, but with the university, what happens here is that they have the opportunity to create an environment that is inclusive.
Well, that pressure seemed to work because, Harris, we saw the university president step down in the last hour. You were watching that news conference.
Yeah, so at one point, Wolf quoted scripture, and he then asked that his resignation be used to heal, not to hate. But let's talk a little bit about how we got here and what this group wants, okay? They want quotas built into the school hiring system such that it has more diversity in it. Their next game was against Brigham Young at an NFL stadium. So this football team had a lot of leverage that maybe people don't know about. That's millions of dollars right there. They had a lot of leverage, but some of the things they wanted, I was not clear how any of that, other than his leaving, was going to take place before the next football game. I mean, they have accused the local police who've responded to an incident on campus of excessive force. They want that looked at. I mean, there were so many things that these students were asking for that just seemed to be outside the realm of what's possible before the next football game, but maybe I'm missing something.
And as Harris mentioned, Judge, 30 black football players saying they weren't going to participate. One was even participating in a hunger strike. It worked. And now, my question is, are we going to be seeing this at other universities? I mean, of course, Ferguson in Missouri, where racial tensions were, fanned very high last summer. Is this going to be a theme now?
Well, we start with a couple of basics. This is not Yale, which has had similar instances, because this is a public school owned by the state of Missouri, and it has constitutional obligations of fairness that a private university does not have. If that African-American woman is afraid to walk on that campus, then obviously something is wrong with the campus, not with her. On the other hand, to have a couple of dozen students hold the presidency hostage and to have the football coach agree will set a very, very dangerous precedent. Suppose they don't like his successor. Are they going to do the same thing? Who's hiring the president? The football team or the board of trustees?
Right.
But when it comes to this idea of quotas, I'm just curious about how they're going to move forward and justify that. I realize it's a public school.
That would make the quotas unconstitutional.
Right? Because,
Absolutely.
I mean, you're trying to get the best people for the job. These are students that you're trying to educate. I'm just asking that question because I'm confused by what they really want the end game to look like.
Look, we don't know the exact facts of what preceded all this. It obviously was a very, very uncomfortable place, and there was this perception that the president wasn't moving quickly enough to protect African-American students who had legitimate bona fide fears. But the president and the board has to run the school, not the students.
But they had teachers standing with them, the students.
The coach
stood with them. So there has to have been some truth to this, and it had to have been at an escalated level for it to go this far. And I think him stepping down was the most honorable thing for him to do for himself.
Now, are they going to demand a veto
in a way,
over
an admittance
him?
of guilt?
That's what I'm wondering is what comes next, because the president had come out and he had said, look, I pledge to find out who did some of these awful incidents, which I don't even want to describe them on TV, but they were awful, Julie. They have not found the perpetrator of that incident, but the president said, I'm going to work on it. He came out, he apologized. It wasn't enough. So to the judge's point, does the football team now going forward sort of run the administration and the HR department?
No, I don't think
but
that doesn't send that message.
But I will say, I will say this. What's interesting about this is you actually have a peaceful protest accomplishing something.
Exactly.
We haven't seen that in a very long time. And I mean, to the point, this is something you really haven't seen since, I guess, the 60s, well before I was around, of where you actually have...
Did you have to look at me when you said
I did,
60s?
Judge. I was looking right at you.
When we had these protests.
I know those crazy Princeton days. I know how crazy you hippies were at Princeton in the 60s. But
You're telling me I was a hippie
You
in
were
those
a crazy
days?
Princeton hippie. I know you. But look, the nice thing about this is that you actually have students, faculty getting together, trying to effectuate change.
That's a really good point.
No throwing of firebombs. No, shouting. No racist name calling.
I think if
just
anything,
somebody getting together and
it's
doing
going to show people that if you make a stand for something and if it's true, then there will be a consequence for the actions that are wrong if you do the right thing. But you cannot get the right response when you do it with violence or, with shouting things like kill cops. That's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah. Harris, should they have allowed the president to stay, apologize, and rectify the wrongdoing?
There are a lot of questions about how this whole thing was handled. I know the chancellor has spoken about this, saying that they acknowledged that there were some racism challenges on campus, and my goodness, they'd have to be blind not to see them with some of the things that have been reported. So should the president have been allowed to stay is a big question. But again, I scratch my head as to what will happen going forward. Like, what was the end game with all of this? And I understand the peaceful protests, but they never would have had that leverage without that football team.
Oh, that's
I mean, the timing of this and them stepping in, those players, made a world of difference.
Well,
because they accomplished the one thing that they might not have had with that in a short order, and that was to get everybody's attention.
Well, they might have started some dominoes falling, and they don't know where they're going to end up.
And as you mentioned, Judge, public schools, the focus is really on them.
Yes.
All right.